All right, guys, I'm going to say something super controversial. You ready for it? All right, big breath. Hello, and welcome back to a Squirrel Plays. Today we're going to be talking about world building. Yes, sirree, Bob. Good times ahead. Now, this won't be about any single specific type of world building, meaning I won't be focusing on just ttrpg world building or just writing and world building, nor will I focus on any particular setting. Instead, we'll be having a look at what is and isn't too much. And I'll go ahead and tell you it's better to have a little bit too much than not enough. But even then, you need to know when and where to stop, right? And as I write this down, I've realized something. It's typically single individuals I see get carried away with world building and do too much of it, whereas larger studios or groups tend to let it wither a bit, which makes sense, I suppose. Individuals often care a lot more about the project than the average studio, so it's only natural that said individual would end up getting carried away with the world building. Well, what's wrong with a little extra world building, you might wonder? And truth be told, if you world build more than you actually need to, it doesn't automatically mean your work is ruined. It actually does add depth to your work, but it also opens the door for some problems to sneak in. Mainly, or at least one that I see a lot, is that when people put a lot of effort into their world building, they really want to make sure you see that work they did. They want to make sure you get all the details, which leads to exposition and lore dumps and things that just generally run the flow, which is why you hire a good editor, right? Good example of that would be this book here called Andruvia, and I think I've mentioned this book before. It's not great, but it does have really good learning opportunities. The author clearly put some effort into his world. He came up with different races, countries, fleshed out some relations, you know, all that good stuff. But he also made sure you got all that information whether or not it was relevant to the story, and let me tell you right now, a lot of it wasn't. If he had stopped while he was ahead, he might have, and notice that I do say might, have avoided that trap. Another example, and one that I unfortunately, or really I guess fortunately, didn't get to see play out. It was a few years ago at this point, but back when Glee was streaming on Twitch and we were playing our very first D&D campaign, she had a particularly chatty viewer. He had a 652-page document for his campaign that he had been working on for a couple of years at that point. And I remember that number because he was very proud of it and made sure to mention it multiple times. Now look, I know I'm against the big blanket rules, but I'm just gonna say it. I don't think any campaign needs 652 pages of information unless it's like a series of campaigns or something, and even that's a stretch. That's a lot of lore. He was coming up with rules for his magic and religions and sites and locations and, you know, Lord knows what else. Now, unless he has extremely supportive friends he plays with, do you think he's going to be very happy with how that campaign pans out? Do you think he's really going to use all of that information he crafted? And was even half of it necessary to make the adventure work? My guess is probably not, and I imagine that person probably got a bit salty about it, assuming the campaign ever got started. So the big question is, how do we know when to stop? And the answer is, after you like and subscribe. Actually, the real answer to that question might be even worse. Because the answer is, it depends. I know, super helpful, but it's true. So let's look at a couple different cases and how I handle it and see if you can't get anything useful out of it. Now, it should go without saying that what I'm about to tell you isn't any kind of law or official rule. It's just how I've handled things over the years. And to start off, let's look at the tabletop world because that's the one I put the least amount of effort into. I intentionally do as little world building as possible, and there's a couple reasons for that. The first one being it saves time. There's no greater feeling than spending a day working out the mechanics of a world only to have your players completely skip everything you worked on or never bother to use. And number two, it allows more room for the players to shape the world. One of my favorite things to do is ask the players between sessions, hey, what do you think this means? Or why do you think this person is doing this thing? Where do you think the story is headed? What do you think is really cooking behind the scenes? Hey, why did that fireball explode in your face? Why was there a greased up naked tiefling running through Waterdeep shouting praise Talos? I love seeing what they come up with to try and make sense of something that is currently unknown. Sometimes I get to use their ideas in full, and sometimes I get to use them in part, and then sometimes they fit perfectly on top of what little I had already planned for them. But more importantly, as already mentioned, it saves time, and with that time I can do things like make more interesting maps or traps or enemies, that kind of thing. Tabletop is a lot of improv, so it's absolutely okay in my book to leave blanks. In our current campaign, we've been going to several different alternate versions of the world. I don't come up with gods and religions and all that for each world. I just do the basics. So for example, the world they're currently in is out in the Old West with dwarfs. There's a temple underground that they dug up, and it belongs to an ancient people called the Provinians. And what race is that, and what does that name even mean? Not a clue. I slapped the keyboard, and that's the name I got after a little bit of correction. I have no idea what the dwarves actually believe in, how they feel about gay rights, if there's another town nearby, or who knows what else. If a player asks them about something, I'll have to come up with something on the spot, which to me is better than writing down all the alternatives and telling them to hold on a minute while I look up the answer. As for the Provinians, all I know is that 1, they're dead, and 2, they really liked bringing back the dead, which may or may not have something to do with why their skeletons are walking around and giving the party a hard time. There's an item in this world that the party knows exists and that they need to retrieve, so they have their goal. Everything else is just a bonus flavor. And hey, sometimes when you have to make up stuff on the spot, it leads to some memorable moments. The first campaign we played, the party had some dealings with a monastery. I had a guy answer the door, and that's about all he was supposed to do, but the party got to talking to him. They wanted a name. I had not planned for that. So I said, well, his name is Ross. And from there, he became the nicest monk you've ever seen, and as the story progressed, he even became head of the monastery later on. I even made the snazzy token for him since he became a reoccurring character. Now, what about writing a story? How does world building work over there? Or at least, how does the squirrel do it? He gets tea. Tasty, tasty tea. Well, despite how some modern movies do it, you probably shouldn't leave the world building to your audience.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
We talked briefly about this over in the Discord, and I'll quote one of the members who goes by the name the Lego Fan 21. Doesn't matter if there's 14 oceans, 26 countries, and 1,000 languages if you're only in one city where everyone speaks the same language. Essentially, if it's nothing your audience is going to see or deal with, then there's not much need to dive into it and sort out all the mechanics. However, there is a bit of a gray area here. For example, an evil wizard hurls a fireball at the hero of the story. We saw the magic. Do we, the audience, need to know everything about how magic works in this world? And I think this is where people would tend to start disagreeing with one another on what is and isn't acceptable. And to explore this example, I'm going to be looking at 2 different types of world building. We'll call them one-shot world building and universe building. One-shot worlds would be single-book stories, or really, as much as I dislike them, I guess trilogies would fit into this category because it's still just one story, albeit a really long story, but still one. Universe building is when you're creating an entire universe for multiple stories to take place in. The world D&D takes place in would be universe building because several stories take place there. Star Wars is universe building, the Metroid series, Zelda, Marvel, you get the idea. Multiple stories that will need to follow the same rules and history that you've created. And if it isn't obvious, the main difference is that universe building takes a whole lot more work than one-shot world building. And here's what I mean by that. Let's say you're following the hero of the story. Up to this point, you have seen no magic. He's pretty handy with a sword, but we're still early on in this adventure, so anything could happen, right? A big bad wizard comes out of nowhere and hurls a fireball at him. Our hero survives the encounter, but now we have questions. So many questions. Why didn't the wizard cast a bigger fireball and obliterate the hero in one go? Why didn't the wizard start spewing fireballs like a magical Gatling gun? How easily accessible is this magic? Could enough wizards get together and demolish an entire castle with fireballs? Can you cook a meal on a wizard's fireball? And these are things that you, my creative friend, should know. And why? So you can be consistent when you need to be. Unlike Star Wars when it comes to the Force.
Stand off. Let's go.
Or lightsabers. Or Mandalorian armor. or hyperspace travel.
Traveling through hyperspace ain't like dusting crops, boy. Without precise calculations, we'd fly right through a star or bounce too close to a supernova and then it'd end your trip real quick, wouldn't it?
But how deep does one need to go? For a one-shot story, my suggestion is that you figure out the limits of that magic. How big does the fireball go? How many can the wizard toss? What's the cost for casting the magic? Who all has access to that kind of magic? That will help you get things stabilized and consistent. But if a fireball is all we ever see, then that's really all you need to explore. You don't need to worry about ice magic or lightning or wind or anything like that. In a one-shot story, you have significantly more wiggle room when it comes to leaving things as they are. This is an isolated story in an isolated location. Elsewhere in that world, there might be wizards going around demolishing castles. Summoning fire might be a critical part of the technology curve. But in this story, this wizard might be the only thing with magic. Unfortunately, that doesn't work very well over in universe building. On that side of the fence, you do have to think about silly things like, hey, can you cook a meal on a wizard's fireball? You need to consider that there just might be a ragtag team of wizards at some point in time that did go out and wipe out a castle. If they did, how would that influence other wizards? How would that influence the regulation of magic? When you're universe building, I really don't think it's possible to have too much world building. While it may not get used in your current story, any work you put in now will just help solidify the next story, and the one after that, and then the one after that. Now, of course, if world building is something you just really enjoy doing, obviously do as much of it as you like. Doesn't matter if it's for a TTRPG or a one-shot story. Go nuts. Just make sure you stay on the lookout, though, and make sure you're not piling it all on somebody when they don't need it. And if you're wondering by this point where exactly the line in the sand for you to stop is, there really isn't one. You know how I feel about those definite rules of writing. My 2 cents is to just ask yourself if it's relevant to the story you're trying to tell. If the story is about stopping a big bad wizard, is it really important to know whether or not the local population believes eating cows is a sin? And really, that's about all I've got. Pretty sure I've rambled on long enough at this point. Hopefully you got something useful out of this, and if you did, be sure to leave a thumbs up and all that jazz, and if you didn't, be sure to leave a thumbs up and all that jazz. And for today's shout out, let's give it to, how about this guy? This is Adam from the Inn of Planar Crossroads. He's an aficionado of the weird and the strange, a master GM, a preacher, a podcaster, an artist, and heck, he's even blue. I mean, look at that, just blue all over. No idea why, though, but hey, he lets me on his show from time to time, so I'm not going to be rude and ask. And speaking of, I think we'll be recording this weekend talking about post-apocalyptic things in your TTRPGs, so that'll be neat. And that's it, my friendos. I have rambled for far too long and probably didn't make too much of a point, but I do hope you were able to pull something useful out of it. World building is a lot of fun, but it is easy to get a bit carried away with it and lose your focus. So, how far into the world building do you go for your TTRPGs? How far do you go into it for your stories? How far do you think one should go for either one? Or better yet, what are some of your own rules and tips you've set in place that you found have worked well for you? All right, I'm done. Bye.